Hey, yo, Fro Wrestling Podcast listeners, help us out and click subscribe to show your support, and make sure you enable notifications so they get the updates to you every time an episode goes live for you guys as quick as possible. And while you're at it, if you are sick and tired of dropping $60 to $100 for the latest, greatest wrestling video game every single year, stop immediately. Go to Wrestler Unstoppable, available exclusively through Facebook. Create your wrestler, sign contracts, get involved in storylines, headline pay-per-views, even build your own corporation, all included for free at Wrestler Unstoppable, available now to Facebook users worldwide. And if you want to become a member of the Fro Wrestling Podcast family and you want your name in the shoutouts like our good buddy Harold in St. Louis, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/Fro Wrestling Podcast. Sign up today, and for the month of December, any of our $15 contributors are going to get an opportunity to co-host an episode of Going Live with me. And for our $10 contributors, we will have a lucky drawing for one person from our $10 contributor level to also co-host an episode of Going Live with me on one of our Saturday night episodes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live episode of the Fro Wrestling Podcast. Don't forget, fan voting in the round 5 of the greatest female wrestler of all time tournament is going on right now. The voting closes tonight at midnight. Go to frowrestling.com, click on the tournament link, and you can cast your vote in our greatest female wrestler of all time tournament. We're going to touch on today's news. All week has been kind of crazy. There's tons of stuff going on. Feel free to call into the Fro Wrestling Sound Off line at 267-642-1160 at any point throughout the show. It is our talk to text service. You can give us a message there. It'll send me a text and let me know what it is that you want to discuss on this episode of Going Live at 9:05. And when you are in the Spreaker app, if you're a Spreaker user, you can go in and there is a chat feature that will pop your questions, comments, concerns, and everything like that right up on the screen here for me to address while we're here on the air live. So, all that being said, like I said, it's been a crazy, crazy week for the Fro Wrestling Podcast. So much news to talk about. For those who have never been tuned into one of our episodes in the past, the Fro Wrestling Podcast would like to welcome you guys. If you're newbies, go to frowrestling.com at any point to see the topics that we're going to discuss on upcoming episodes. That way, if you have questions, comments, concerns, we're missing something that you think is really important we need to address, you could pop it in there and give us some feedback ahead of time, and we could try to get your information into the shows as quickly as possible. Remember, our audience is our driving force behind this podcast, so by all means, we want to incorporate as much information from the interest of our listeners as we can. This week, all kinds of things. I'm going to get started early with Lio Rush. For those who are fans of Lio Rush's work, whether it was Ring of Honor or if he was wrestling, Evolve and places like that, Lio Rush is one of the best. Up through the summertime, was one of the best independent wrestlers in the world. And then at the end of the summer, early September, he signed with World Wrestling Entertainment, and he was going through their developmental program down at the Performance Center and got himself into some trouble when Emma was released from her contract. For those who don't know or are sleeping under a rock and haven't heard the wrestling news, he had some heat, major heat backstage for kind of making a joke of Emma's firing, referencing her not being ready for Asuka. Well, it had been speculated on for several weeks that Lio Rush may have actually been released from his contract, and then this week he removed all references to NXT or WWE from any of his social media, and it made people feel like maybe this was the evidence to support the fact that he had been let go. It turns out that is not the case. Lio Rush actually was at house shows all week with the NXT brand for the first time since those controversial comments came out, and I actually am thrilled to see that because let's face it, he spent the better part of the last month living in obscurity because everybody wanted to put the guy down for having a knee-jerk reaction to the news that Emma got fired, and I understand why people were a little frustrated with what he said. It's never something to joke about when somebody loses their method of income. However, if you look at his tweet when he originally put it out there, it was almost like he was playing up Asuka's character and not so much trying to bash Emma. That's just my opinion. I could be in the minority. If I am, that's great, but that's just the way I read it. I didn't take it as like a malicious tweet trying to bury Emma. I felt like it was more in jest than anything. So to fire the guy or to hold him down for too long would, in my opinion, be very absurd. He's incredibly talented. If you've never seen his matches, I encourage you to go on to YouTube or wherever you need to and check those out if you can. Go on to the Global Wrestling Network. Not that I'm giving them a plug or anything, but my good buddy Harold in St. Louis and I have been talking about the Global Wrestling Network. There are a host of independent companies available on that network, more added this week even, that I feel like this is where WWE missed the boat with the WWE Network. At the beginning, there was conversation about how they were going to bring other programming to their network and bring in other promotions and whatnot, and that never really happened. ICW in progress. There's been some conversation about doing something with them, but this was an opportunity. They should have brought in Evolve. They should have gone in contact. They have a great working relationship in the past with Ring of Honor, with Impact Wrestling, and Impact Wrestling's been having, financial troubles for the better part of the last couple years. They really should have gone out of their way to make a deal with some of these other companies to bring their product to the WWE Network, to make it the only place to go to watch a full gamut of wrestling action. And instead, WWE got so caught up in promoting their own product that they've kind of let everybody else go by the wayside. And the problem with that is, or a good thing for those of us who are diehard wrestling fans who are into the Global Wrestling Network, is the GWN has now signed on many of these smaller promotions. Border City Wrestling, AAW, places like that, Wrestle Circus. You can go on there and see some of these really cool programs that you have no exposure to in a lot of other places. Or if you do, it's a lot of times it's the YouTube channels or whatnot, and there you're hoping to get the matches that you really want to see, and sometimes you have to wait a while to see them. A lot of what's there is not new. I'll just be upfront about that. If you have never checked out the Global Wrestling Network, I encourage you to do so. Some of the stuff is historical TNA Impact footage, but some of the independent promotion stuff out there is also from the past, but interestingly enough, usually focuses on people who are either current Impact stars, before they were with Impact, or there's a lot of WWE contracted talent that used to wrestle elsewhere, and you can get to see them long before they were WWE stars by tuning into this network. So I highly encourage you to check that out. Thanks to my buddy Harold in St. Louis for turning me on to that network. It's actually a really solid product, and something I think that really they did what WWE should have done. WWE should have really taken the time to figure out how to make a deal with some of these other companies and really have given us a better network experience, and instead leave it to Impact Wrestling to get it right. And it's kind of shocking if you ask me. Going to move on to a first for the Women's Revolution. As everybody knows, the last couple years, the real emphasis has been on cultivating the greatest deep roster of female talent that WWE has ever had. I know there's some conjecture about whether Impact Wrestling with the Knockouts division, Gail Kim, Awesome Kong, people like that, Taryn Terrell, if they were an influence on the Women's Revolution, and in a lot of ways I'm sure they are, but WWE has taken it to a whole nother level, producing countless talents now at this point that are all phenomenal wrestlers. Forget the entertainment side of things. I understand, they put women in the ring and they're trying to attract the male audience, for obvious reasons. But the reality is these girls can go. Back in the 80s and the 90s, you had Medusa Maselli, Alundra Blaze, whatever you want to call her, and you had like Bull Nakano and a few other people who could really go. But other than that, the ladies of the wrestling world really weren't there to be action-packed, exciting matches. They were there as eye candy. And now you can get a 5-star quality match out of some of these women. Sasha Banks and Charlotte last year were phenomenal. If you look at the roster now, especially with the new NXT call-ups to the main roster, the 5 of them, the returning Paige, plus the other talents that were already on the roster, if you take out Dana Brooke and Lana, because I think they're probably the least talented in-ring performers, the rest of that roster is stacked. Even Alicia Fox, I'll give her credit, can actually go a bit in the ring better than what traditional women's wrestling was years ago. Now you did have when women's wrestling first got started with the Mullahs, even before that Mildred Burks and people like that, yes, it was a lot more realistic and they could wrestle a lot better than the women. It's like there was a dead space era where the women just were literally eye candy, and that's it. No talent. Then you started getting the influx of people like Trish Stratus and Lita. Chyna, she's kind of an exception to the rule because she was just a beast. But, you had a few people who could go, but never the quantity that you have now. You have easily 15 to 20 thoroughly solid female competitors just under the WWE banner. And that's counting people who are still in NXT who haven't even been called up to the main roster yet. They haven't called up Peyton Royce. she may be one of the best they've got. Ember Moon, who's the current NXT Women's Champion. So there's a lot of talent there that wasn't there in the past. So that being said, it is time for the next step in the women's revolution. So the theory was, in January, they would be moving towards a women's Royal Rumble. Now, it has not been signed off on yet. My understanding from all the news outlets, and I'll do this now because, I don't want anybody to be mad at me. I have verified all this information that I give you tonight. You can go check out at WrestleZone.com, eWrestlingNews.com, CageSideSeats.com, The Bleacher Report. You can go to Wrestling Inc., I actually am a huge fan of Wrestling Inc., PWIOnline.com, PW Insider, the Wrestling Observer newsletter. They all cover the same stories. I actually, and somebody asked me recently why I give that shout out to all those websites. It's very simple. I've actually gotten emails from 2 of those websites complaining that I'm in some way taking their news story. I hate to break it to everybody, but if you go online right now and look up something about Lio Rush, on every one of those websites, you'll get the exact same, almost word-for-word reporting of the Lio Rush situation, and they all claim that it's their own original content, or if they don't, they always want you to cite them at the bottom as being where you found your information from. Well, I hate to break it to people. I find my information from the same places they find their information from, same sources. So, sorry, I had to get that off my chest. Back to the Women's Revolution. So now, the thought process was, with the quantity of women that they have on the roster right now, that they would be moving towards a Women's Royal Rumble. And despite the fact that that has not been signed off, what it sounds like, according to the comments by Kurt Angle in the past and now recently, backstage report is that they're looking at a women's elimination chamber for the February pay-per-view. The only thing I have a trouble with that is I feel like that's a pay-per-view that should be co-branded. For those who didn't notice, they put out the pay-per-view schedule late last week, early this week, and instead of doing, I believe it was 16 pay-per-views this year, they're going to be only doing 14 next year, cutting down just a little bit, which I'm fine with that. It's still more than one a month, but if you're going to do that, they're going to have 5 co-branded pay-per-views. The normal Big 4, Royal Rumble, Survivor Series, SummerSlam, WrestleMania. They're going to add Money in the Bank as a co-branded pay-per-view. I feel like the Elimination Chamber should be as well. The specialized gimmick ones, I think, should always be co-branded. If there's going to be a Hell in a Cell, that should be co-branded. All the other stuff with the generic names, Great Balls of Fire and No Way Out and Backlash and whatever, those could all be brand specific. But when it comes to gimmicky style pay-per-views, to me, they should all be co-branded. But it looks like the Women's Revolution will get a little bit of an injection of life in the arm. They may be getting a Royal Rumble. That's still to be determined. But it sounds relatively positive that they will get an Elimination Chamber. I had a friend of mine actually say to me this week he would love to see a tag team Elimination Chamber this year, since there are so many tag teams on the roster right now, and have literally a pair of guys stuck in each one of those boxes and have them just tear each other up. I actually think that would be a lot of fun, too. You could build a whole pay-per-view around only a few matches, all Elimination Chamber-style matches. Moving on, big news this week about Brock Lesnar. His return date has been announced. He will be back on Raw on December 18th. Clearly, that is designed for him to begin the build towards Royal Rumble and to WrestleMania season. I suspect that, the Royal Rumble build has changed significantly from what they were planning in the past. People had speculated that he was going to have a very different trajectory earlier this year at the Royal Rumble. We thought he was going to be going against Finn Balor. That apparently is off. We're actually going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but it sounds like now the rumor is that Seth Rollins, you got Roman Reigns, who won the Intercontinental Championship. You got Dean Ambrose, who wasn't even on Raw last week, but that Seth Rollins will be the one who will step up and get an opportunity at the Royal Rumble to face Brock Lesnar, and that Dean Ambrose will be the one to cost Seth Rollins the match, leading to the breakup of the Shield and leading to a feud between Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, because we haven't already seen that feud 347 times. That is what I am understanding is the backstage plan at this moment. However, I guarantee you, obviously we already know Brock Lesnar is going to win that match, and I'm actually getting tired of the booking being so lazy that we always know who's going to win. It's so infrequent that we're shocked by a surprise ending at the end of a pay-per-view. The Survivor Series was pretty good with the way they worked the Triple H and Braun Strowman thing, but as the match went on, you kind of could see things forming there. Just a little bit, just enough. And it's like they don't have the creative juices flowing anymore like they used to. Long-term booking is like a dying art form. And so when you look at this, it doesn't matter who they put against Brock Lesnar in January. We already know they're going to lose. So if that's the case, my opinion, this is purely my own fantasy booking here, you need to look at what is the biggest money match that people want to see that Brock Lesnar could still retain the championship, but it's still a viable pay-per-view main event. And that is only one match, and that's against Finn Balor. WWE put out a poll this week asking who should be the next person to challenge Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship. And with overwhelming results, it was Finn Balor. Finn Balor actually went out on Twitter this week. He's been going on and on and on. The rumors came out last week that Vince McMahon does not think that Finn Balor is over enough to be the Universal Champion. And that when he's not the demon character, he's very bland. He's not over with the fans. So he has been making over references on his Twitter account all week long. I know that Balor is a huge Triple H guy, but I got to wonder if it's pissing Vince off. And at the point, honestly, I don't care. I think Vince is so out of touch with reality that he thinks that the fans are stupid. I'll give you another example. Luke Harper and Eric Rowan, they have returned to wrestling as the Bludgeon Brothers, which I guess we're all supposed to make believe that we don't remember that they were a part of the Wyatt family, and their last name, I would assume, would have somehow had some connection to Wyatt. We're supposed to forget that they had last names, or first names. We're just supposed to call them Harper and Rowan at this point. And Vince McMahon's justification for that was it makes them sound more menacing and more forceful. Why? We know who these guys are. We've seen them for the last 3-4 years. You're not surprising us with anything. To play that card is just asinine. Anyways, so I wish WWE would look at these things a little closer and try to plan a little bit better. Finn Balor deserves this opportunity. And I don't know if anybody noticed. I saw this published. I'm going to give credit here. I will go specifically to, I want to say Cage Side Seats, who put out a thing that if you haven't noticed, I apologize, it was eWrestling News, who put out that no one who has lost the Universal Championship to date has gotten a rematch. So Finn Balor had to surrender the championship the night after he won it. He never got his rematch. Kevin Owens wins the championship by defeating Seth Rollins in the final of that Fatal 4-Way, and Rollins never got a rematch. Kevin Owens loses the Universal Championship to Bill Goldberg and never gets a rematch. Bill Goldberg loses the Universal Championship to Brock Lesnar and never gets a rematch. So it only seems fitting that the first one who should get a rematch would be the guy who won it first. Put the match together. The fans want to see it. Finn Balor versus Brock Lesnar at the Royal Rumble. Brock will still win, but fans will get a match they really want to see. That's what WWE needs to do. Speaking of things they don't need to do, though, Ken Shamrock was out this week running his mouth about what he wants to do, what his terms would be for a WWE return. He talked about how he never won the World Championship, and that's something he wants to do. And he wants to wrestle with people like Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, people of that nature. And that sounds great, but Ken Shamrock, you're in your 50s. You're not an attraction anymore, not in the pro wrestling world. You're barely an attraction in the mixed martial arts world. You know, Bellator has a tough time selling your fights anymore because you got stomped by what's his name? Oh, dude that passed away, unfortunately. Anyway, he lost his last Bellator fight. It's not something where we consider him to be a threat to anybody anymore. And so why would people in the WWE want to bring back Ken Shamrock? To do what? To make their brand look weaker? You don't want somebody who goes to mixed martial arts and can't win a fight. That's not what you bring to your brand. Brock Lesnar coming back after being UFC heavyweight champion, that's impactful. Bringing back a guy who's long past his prime, way over the hill, and can't beat anyone, that's a totally different story. Not something I think WWE would be interested in. Dear God, please don't let them be interested, because it is a horrible booking idea. If you're going to bring back part-timers, that's not the part-timer to bring back. It's just my opinion. Speaking of things that are my opinion, I gotta vent a little bit about this 205 Live. For those who are checking FroWrestling.com to see the topics we were going to talk about tonight, I put on there 205 Live frustrations. And the reason I put that on there is because I feel like we watch the exact same match every single... And I know I say that about Raw too, and SmackDown to a degree, but 205 Live has no flavor whatsoever. Even Enzo is boring now. And it's to the point where they don't know how to book anything serious. Every once in a while, they bring in like an influx of a new guy. I know Hideo Itami's supposed to debut soon. They brought Kalisto in. But even that gets boring real fast. What they need is an injection of talent. You just brought 5 women and a returning Page to the main roster of the women's division. You need a huge influx of cruiserweight talent. And, one of those easily could be Rockstar Spud. One of those should have been James Ellsworth. 2 more should be the Singh brothers. But WWE seems so reluctant. And the other thing is you could build an entire brand around that cruiserweight division if you added the United Kingdom competitors and either, give up on this UK brand and just put them into 205 Live, or do something. Create cruiserweight tag team championships. Do something. Go sign some independent guys and put them right on the main roster. People who have a huge name. Ricochet, Will Ospreay, people like that. Just go find people. There are non-contracted talents that you could be signing right now to bolster 205 Live, but right now, there is not 1% reason for me to go and watch that show. To be perfectly honest with people, I haven't watched it in quite a while. I read the results. Why? I've seen Brian Kendrick and Jack Gallagher wrestle Cedric Alexander and Rich Swann about 400 times. I don't need to see it anymore. I want to see something of substance. Yes, these guys can jump and fly and sprint and flip and kick and all that stuff like crazy. I get it. But we need more than just all the high spots. That's not what 205 Live should be. The TNA Impact X division, when it came out, was not about weight class, and it wasn't about high spots. Yes, there were tons of high spots. It was about a unique, tough presentation where you got excitement, but you also had great storytelling, great storylines, good selling in the ring. When there was a high spot, people didn't spring up off the apron and go for the next big move. They actually cultivated a storyline. They let things come together in the ring, and it was a beautiful presentation. That's what 205 Live needs to be. Speaking of things that are phenomenal, though, NXT. So for those people, if you do not like spoilers, here's your spoiler alert. Don't listen for the next 2 minutes because we have a spoiler from the NXT tapings. Okay? I gave you your fair warning. So the tag team championship in NXT is going to change hands at the tapings. Sanity is going to lose the championship to the Undisputed Era. Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, Red Dragon, are going to take those championships. The episode won't air for several weeks, so that's why, we're doing the whole spoiler warning thing. But I think this was a natural progression of things. They are so over with the fans. People love this Ring of Honor stable. I expect Adam Cole to find his way into the world title picture sooner rather than later. And I think that's the way things ought to be, because Ring of Honor, you took 3 guys who were at the apex of the Ring of Honor brand at some point in their careers, and you bring them in, and you should be showcasing the style of them. It's the closest we're going to get to when a star jumps from like WWE to WCW back in the day, or vice versa. We don't have a lot of that anymore. It's not like EC3 is going to show up in WWE programming tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. So it would be really nice for them to find a way to give you some intrigue and mystique, and this would be a great way. We bring in the Undisputed Era and you put them right into the main event right off the bat. Some people I know don't like that. They think that it's kind of dumping on the guys who've been there for a long time and paid their dues. I get it. You know what? It's a wrestling business. We're not here to worry about who paid their dues. We're here to put on an entertaining product. Keep paying your dues. Your time will come. Work hard. People like Jack Swagger and Matt Morgan, wrestlers who do podcasts and commentary, talk all the time about, if you don't like your spot, work harder. Keep working hard. Some people work incredibly hard and still don't get a break, like Dolph Ziggler. Dolph Ziggler was on the Edge and Christian podcast of awesomeness this week, talking about how he's absolutely fed up with his position in WWE. He's looking forward to when his contract comes due the next time, because he thinks he needs to take some time away. He needs to go somewhere else, increase his value to WWE, because things have gotten stale. He wants to be at the top of the card, and right now he's not. And he actually pointed out how much he loses. Dolph Ziggler is one of the best wrestlers in the world. Why is he losing all the time? You got enough talent in WWE that you could really spread the wins and losses around and not take someone who's as talented as Dolph Ziggler and bury him all the time. Look, I don't have a problem with Bobby Roode being pushed. I love Bobby Roode's character to death. But you've got a year's worth of investment in Dolph Ziggler and a huge following, and he really deserves a better position than what he currently has on the card. It's a little bit frustrating. By the way, speaking of Impact Wrestling a few moments ago in their X division, one of their stars currently, the Impact Wrestling Knockouts division, has one of their biggest stars is requesting their release. Laurel Von Ness, who was a competitor on Tough Enough the last time we had a season, has requested her release from Impact Wrestling. Now, it has not been granted yet, but I have a strong feeling that there is feelers out there. And this kind of ties into a previous story we just got done talking about, the potential for a Royal Rumble, that maybe she wants to get out of that contract now so she can maybe be able to compete at that first Women's Royal Rumble. She would be a great addition to the WWE roster. I can't imagine where else she'd want to go. Maybe Ring of Honor for the Women of Honor, but otherwise, where else are you going to go? She's established herself as a legitimate draw as a knockout competitor. Absolutely, bring her in. And I think it would be completely ridiculous for Impact Wrestling to let her go. I'd tell her, no, you've got a contract. Work out your dates. We won't renew you, but you got to work out this contract. Right now, it seems like every person who gets frustrated with Impact Wrestling, they just grant their release, and that's the end of it. What kind of business model is that? Stay until you get the boo-boo face, and then just let everybody leave. It's ridiculous. Speaking of people who didn't leave but who won't be back anytime soon, Drew McIntyre, a quick update on his condition. After NXT TakeOver, he did suffer a major injury to his arm in the last move of the match. I know a lot of people thought that the championship was not supposed to change hands. That is not accurate. It was scheduled to change hands, but McIntyre was supposed to get his return match at NXT TakeOver Philadelphia, and unfortunately he is not going to make that, nor will he make most of the events the rest of the year until probably around April, May, June-ish. Because that's how serious the injury is. He went under the knife, he had surgery, and now we expect he'll be out 6 months. 4 to 6 months. That sucks, because I was really looking forward to the rematch, and I was actually looking forward to him being called up to the main roster right after WrestleMania. Now he would clearly need to go back to NXT, work off the ring rust and get his position back before he could come up to the main roster in any kind of meaningful way. Speaking of meaningful wrestling matches, the big news for me personally, as the kind of fan that I am, this week hearing that Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks are looking to finance their own wrestling show called All In. And this show would take place next year, and they want to sell out a 10,000-seat arena. Now, let me explain the significance of this. There has not been a sellout of a 10,000-seat arena in a non-WWE sanctioned show since WCW days. That's a long time. 2001 was a long time ago. 2000, 2001, whatever. So it would be a huge, huge accomplishment for both Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and for Ring of Honor, who they want to be a part of this event. Now, Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks are financing the entire thing themselves. Cody Rhodes has made it very clear who he wants to main event this show. Cody Rhodes wants to retain the Ring of Honor Championship to that point, and he wants to defend the Ring of Honor Championship at All In against a returning Daniel Bryan. What an incredible storyline that would be for 2018. Daniel Bryan making a return to Ring of Honor to take the Ring of Honor World Heavyweight Championship from Cody Rhodes. And the beautiful thing about this is Daniel Bryan is under contract to WWE. He can't negotiate with any other company, but what he can do is hear the comments made on Twitter and on social media by Cody Rhodes, by the Young Bucks, by various talents, and respond to them. He's not negotiating a contract. That doesn't violate his contract. And it sounds like it may be something he'd be interested in. However, Brie Bella was out this week, made it very clear that his number one priority is to make a return to a WWE ring. He said they've been very good to him. He loves his job. They pay him very well. He gets to spend a lot of time with Birdie and his wife. So, his first priority is to stay in WWE, but it would be very curious to see what would happen if he got the opportunity to go to Ring of Honor. If WWE is not willing to work with him on this concussion situation, he has been tested by multiple doctors and told that he can compete. At some point, somebody is going to let him get into a ring. Why not it be Ring of Honor with Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks show? That would actually be enough, possibly, to attract the 10,000 people for that one-off show. What an awesome storyline that would be. Talk a little bit about what's going on with Paige. Paige has come back with her group, and it looked like on Monday, for those who were paying close attention, they're teasing that maybe Asuka and Paige are the feud a little bit down the road. Now, I actually would love that. My only concern with that is I feel like they brought Paige back, and she really is on the level with people like Charlotte, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, Bayley. So she's somebody who should be in a prime position. So if you serve her up to Asuka, it seems as though, granted, she's had losses in her career, so it's less of a detriment to her, but so have all the women. I feel like she's the first major high-profile feud you could put Asuka into, and I think that's a good idea. Asuka beating Paige, especially if she has her cronies with her, would be a great idea just to further the legend of Asuka, which has been pretty stale since she's made her main roster debut. So I actually am excited to see if that plan comes together. But we'll have to wait and see, because at this point, who is Asuka going to take on? Who you're willing to allow to lose to her without, totally destroying that person's character? Like, face it, like Bayley used to be unstoppable in NXT. She came to the main roster. She was solid for a little while. Now she can't beat anybody. You could serve up Alicia Fox, but we already know what'll happen there. You're not going to put her with Nia Jax, not right now. At least if they do, that's ridiculous. You need to wait on that a little while. There's conversation of Asuka facing Charlotte somewhere way down the line, but obviously on a competing brands. That's not happening anytime soon. I would expect that after a brand split or draft or whatever they want to call it next year. That would be the only way I could see that happening. So it'll be curious to see who they plan for Asuka in the future, but it sounds like Paige may be the short-term solution to Asuka's first feud. I spoke earlier about 205 Live and people who they should be adding to that roster, and I mentioned the Singh brothers, and I mentioned them because apparently their split from Jinder Mahal is permanent, but the WWE, unlike James Ellsworth, is going to keep them on the roster because they feel that they have value. They're marketable, and they are expanding in the Indian market, and they want to have people that they can relate to. Well, my opinion is that's where you put them on 205 Live. Now, somebody had made reference online, I want to say Wrestling Inc., made reference to them being sent down to NXT to figure out what to do with them. If you're sending them to NXT, who are you going to put them against? They can't beat the Authors of Pain or Sanity. I could see them actually working a pretty decent match with the Undisputed Era, as stupid as that may sound, but they're not going to win. I would much rather see them in a situation where they could flourish, which would be a tag team division on the 205 Live roster. I think that is the best thing to do for them. It keeps them in the storylines. The split from Jinder looks more legit that way. Kind of the way, Enzo migrated to 205 Live after Big Cass suffered his injury. I just think that's a natural progression of things. I look forward to seeing what they do with them, and I hope they do something substantial with them because they really are a solid tag team. And finally for this episode, Alberto El Patron is retiring sometime soon. That's what he keeps saying. But when is the question? So he was doing an interview and spoke about potentially leaving in 2 years, or that he could potentially stay around a little longer than that. He's losing. At one point he had completely lost the passion for the business, and now he enjoys what he's doing. He loves what the company's doing in Impact Wrestling, but that he sees himself potentially walking away in around 2 years, 2019, which he's not the youngest guy in the world, but he's certainly not decrepit by wrestling standards. The guy's like 40, 41, some of that nature. So still a little early to be seeing him leave so quickly, but it sounds like he's very satisfied with his career, all his accomplishments. He has a lot of things going on outside of the wrestling world between restaurants and Combat Americas and everything else. So it looks like it may be a situation where Alberto El Patron's career, at least in ring, may be drawn to a close sooner rather than later, similar to the situation with Dolph Ziggler, except Dolph Ziggler's not leaving the business. Dolph Ziggler is looking to go to Japan. That's his big thing. He wants to try out Japan, increase his stock value in WWE. You think about it, somebody like Juice Robinson, who was pretty much a nobody in NXT, goes to New Japan and becomes a megastar. And Dolph Ziggler is a significantly better talent than Juice Robinson. No offense to Juice Robinson. I think he's fantastic, and in the future he could be something. But right now, Dolph Ziggler's a much better wrestler than Juice Robinson. Him in Japan, he could easily challenge Kazuchika Okada for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship, and it would be a legitimate, buyable match, much like the Chris Jericho versus Kenny Omega thing. I would love to see Dolph Ziggler versus Kenny Omega. I think that would be a fantastic feud. So all these guys talking about leaving WWE or leaving the business, it's kind of scary. You think about this generation, there are not as many right now that you could look at and say, yeah, this guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer. You got the John Cena's, the Randy Ortons, people like that, but who else? Bray Wyatt, is he a Hall of Famer? I think not. Roman Reigns, I'm sure they're going to try to make him one at some point, but so far I can't put him there yet. Maybe soon. I know he's a Grand Slam champion or whatever after winning the Intercontinental Championship, but I'm not ready to make him a Hall of Famer yet. Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, not yet. Maybe someday. Probably someday, but not yet. Dolph Ziggler probably won't get in, even though he probably should. So there's not a lot at the top of the roster. Brock Lesnar will be, but let's face it, that one of the things they hang their hat on with Brock Lesnar is how long he's held his championship. It's real easy to hold it when you never defend it. Both his last 2 runs with the title, he would take months and months off. So what is that? That's not being a fighting champion. That's being a loser champion, just waiting for the next guy to come along. Like, I hate that booking. It's terrible. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us next episode. We'll run down all the latest news and rumors in the world of professional wrestling. Special thanks, as always, go out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for producing all the music and sound effects we use in any of our shows. Today's podcast was sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bringing a new friend to family game night is easy with sketchy people. Showcase your artistic side in this new game from Beazle Games by going to frowrestling.com and clicking the icon in the middle of the screen to pick up your copy just in time for Christmas. And to alleyrepair.com. Contact Alley Repair today for servicing of all your classic skee-ball, pinball, and arcade game needs. If you're looking for your next career move and are considering college, university life, or just need some formal training for your next career decision, go to our website at frolifeplanning.com for all your higher education needs, as Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Mr. Fro. I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us today. And if you're looking for more wrestling news and rumors, go to www.sportsjunkies101.com for the latest articles on the world of professional wrestling. Until next time, take care, everybody, and have a great night.